Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 4 today. Another one of our pre-recorded episodes because we're getting so bored. We're looking to find something to do. And why not fill this episode with all the F1 news that we've missed since kind of the start of the new year and since we've started Season 5. I'm your host, Adrian Keita. Joining me, as ever, is my wonderful co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, same question. Are you bored yet?
It's starting to get to me. Yeah, we're like I said, we're desperately awaiting pre-season testing, all the car launches, all of that, so we can really get into it. But yeah, for the time being, it's getting to me a bit.
So this is episode 4 of season 5, as you will have seen. In the episode prior to this one, there was a lot of controversy regarding our 2025 F1 driver rankings. Mostly from my part, not from Ethan's part. I'm going to say this on this episode. Any controversy and any hate that wants to be fired in our direction, fire it straight to me because I did say a few controversial things in that episode. But let's leave that episode to one side and let's move on to this episode where we will be just looking over some of the F1 news that has happened since the start of 2025, since the start of the new year. So currently we're on the 23rd of January as we're recording this. You lovely people will be hearing this probably a week later, probably towards the start of February, end of Jan. But let's begin with, obviously, the first news will be Red Bull. Sergio Perez departing from the team and Liam Lawson joining Red Bull. Can we say it's quite shocking? I don't think we can, because when it came to Sergio Perez, he was very much lackluster in the season that we've just had in 2024. And I think anything when it comes to his performances in 2024, they more or less went downhill. He joined the team, started tremendously, but then his performances just dipped. And then Liam Lawson joining the team, a little bit unjust on Yuki Tsunoda's side. I think Yuki Tsunoda has been performing fantastically at that sister RB team for the last 3 seasons or so. And I think he deserved the seat at Red Bull. Liam Lawson obviously filled in for Daniel Ricciardo on both occasions in 23 and 24. And don't get me wrong, he's a very talented driver, but is he deserved of that team, of that seat at Red Bull? I don't think he is. I think Yuki Tsunoda has grinded so hard to be able to be given that opportunity to drive a Red Bull. And essentially, he's been given the middle finger by Helmut Marko. That's what I feel like anyway. But Ethan, what have you? Obviously, it did start. This news did start out the new year. Essentially, Sergio Perez leaving and Liam Lawson joining Red Bull. What did you make of the news when it was announced? Did you think it wasn't really a surprise with Sergio Perez departing the team? I think it was always on the cards, but what treatment Yuki Tsunoda got and Liam Lawson joining the team, a little bit unjust on his side.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was destined that Sergio Perez wouldn't be racing at Red Bull this season. But I just feel like the way it was handled could have been done so much better. I think Sergio Perez has been in the sport for what, 13, 14 years. He deserved to be treated with a little bit more respect. I think his contract was up at the end of last season anyway, so they renewed it around Monaco time. There's no need to renew it. Just part ways at the end of the season, do it respectfully, and then sort of there's no bad blood. But you're sacking him 6 months after he's just signed a new contract. It's not been dealt with in the right way. And then for Yuki Tsunoda, again, he's been through it for what, 4 years, I think he's been in the sport. He's grown from strength to strength. There's clearly a progression there. And like you said, he's kind of been shunted and just said, you know what? No, we don't fancy you. I think it was Helmut Marko that actually wanted him in the team, and it was Christian Horner that said no, which goes back to the whole controversy around the Red Bull team, and there being a bit of a power struggle there. So interesting one that maybe I think Christian Horner won out with Liam Lawson getting the seat. But we'll see how that develops over next season.
On to the next one that we kind of saw was Isaac Hadjar completing the Formula One grid as he joined RB, making that progression from Formula Two. Um, can you say it's a really surprising one? I don't think there was anyone in line to really challenge for that RBC. Maybe you could say the likes of Ayumu Iwasa could have really challenged for that RBC, but I think especially with how Isaac Hadjar finished the Formula Two season, I think he was always destined to jump into Formula One and become yet another rookie to join the grid. I believe it's what, six rookies on the grid in 2025 if you want to count Liam Lawson and Ollie Behrman as rookies because they've both raced in Formula One previously. So it's an exciting one for RB, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a challenge there for Isaac Hadjar. Obviously Yuki Tsunoda has had teammates in the past like Daniel Ricciardo, Liam Lawson, Nick De Vries. He also briefly, I think, had Pierre Gasly. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think did he not? Was he not racing with Pierre Gasly in his
No,
first
that was
season?
before he left. That was no,
Was it
no.
not his first season that he was with Pierre Gasly? Pretty sure it was.
Tsunoda.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it
Oh, the
was.
first two seasons. Yeah, I think Gasly left at the end
Yeah.
of 2022.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Yuki Tsunoda was with Pierre Gasly for a brief stint before Gasly moved to
Hmm.
Alpine.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
but obviously Hadjar is yet another rookie teammate. Yuki Tsunoda has battled rookie teammates with Liam Lawson and Nick De Vries, and is Isaac Hadjar going to be yet another rookie teammate that Yuki Tsunoda battles and absolutely demolishes? That's yet to be seen. But Ethan, Isaac Hadjar obviously doesn't bring the amount of hype that a Gabriel Bortoleto or a Kimi Antonelli or an Ollie Behrman brings in. But what impact do you think he could have at RB, and what do you think is needed for him to do to kind of keep hold of his race seat and be seen as a success story at the sister Red Bull team?
Well, I think for the time being, there doesn't look to be somebody in the wings waiting to take his seat. Like you said about, we talked about the turnover at RB. When you had Nick De Vries in the team, you had Daniel Ricciardo as the third driver for Red Bull, so he was waiting there in the wings. When you've got Daniel Ricciardo there struggling, you've got Liam Lawson waiting in the wings. And now, obviously, I think when it was announced Sergio Perez was leaving the team, it was quite clear to me that Isaac Hadjar would get a seat in RB. Whichever one of those two drivers got promoted to Red Bull, there'll be a spare seat, and he'll go to Isaac Hadjar. He needs to hit the ground running. Obviously, there's a big responsibility on him. There's a lot of pressure. You've got to say that Red Bull do give their junior drivers a chance, but they expect them to perform from the get-go. So that's what will be expected. And then, it depends. I think you've got a couple of the Red Bull juniors that have got promoted into F2. So if they hit the ground running in F2 and start racking up the wins, then there might be a bit of pressure around Hadjar. But I think as long as he shows that sign of improvement, sign that he has that raw speed as well, then you'd hope there'd be a bit of patience around it. But obviously, that's not guaranteed at a team like RB.
On to obviously the F1 grid was completed with Isaac Hadjar joining RB. But moving on to two drivers that joined teams as reserve drivers. Franco Colapinto joined Alpine as a reserve driver, and then Valtteri Bottas returned to Mercedes as a reserve driver. Let's talk about Valtteri Bottas first because I think the news broke for Valtteri Bottas first. Yeah, a move where Bottas has kind of moved to a team that brought him a lot of success in Formula One. And obviously, with Bottas not having a seat, he wanted to do something in order to keep himself fit and competitive and ready whenever that chance does strike for him to return to Formula One. Ethan, also another move. What do you make of Valtteri Bottas going back to Mercedes? Is there any possibility that we could see any driver movement for Mercedes? Is it or is it a certain like, is it a move where Valtteri Bottas is just going to be the experienced head and maybe helping George Russell and Kimi Antonelli along their way in kind of their first season in their respective roles, George Russell being the team leader and Kimi Antonelli having his first ever season in Formula One? Do you think that Valtteri Bottas kind of going to be playing the grandfather sort of role at Mercedes in 2025?
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? I think he provides a lot of experience, over 200 races in Formula One. And it is nice to see. It's nice to see that respect between Bottas and Mercedes has remained. I know that when he left the team, that George Russell wasn't announced until actually Valtteri Bottas found another team to race for the following season. So there was always that respect and the mutually between the two parties, and it's nice to see that has actually bared fruit for Valtteri Bottas, because now that he hasn't got that seat at Sauber anymore, he can go back to Mercedes in that third driver capacity. I don't anticipate him getting that full seat, unless something horrific happens. But then again, if Russell or Antonelli have to miss a race for whatever reason, we've seen it plenty of times last season where you had Sainz, Magnussen missing races. Albon a couple of years ago, that there was a driver to step in. And Valtteri Bottas is a good fit for that role. I think he'll be able to direct the team in the right path. And like I said, he's worked for that team for several years, and it's nice to see that relationship's remained.
And now on to Franco Colapinto. Jack Doohan is probably absolutely pooing his pants because the amount of activity that Alpine have done in kind of making their driver pool so much bigger is astonishing. They've not only added Franco Colapinto, but I think they've added a few others into there to be test reserve drivers. But Franco Colapinto obviously stands out as the standalone, probably driver that is likely to get that seat if anything happens to Jack Doohan and if Jack Doohan doesn't perform in the way that he should. Honestly, I feel so sorry for Jack Doohan because if the man doesn't perform in the first half of the season, I do see him shipped out, and I do see Franco Colapinto jumping into the Alpine role. Both of these drivers, both Jack Doohan and both Franco Colapinto, are very raw talents in their own respect, because Jack Doohan has had 2 seasons out of kind of any racing experience after his kind of tenure in Formula 2 finished. And Franco Colapinto stepped into Formula One for a brief stint for Logan Sargent. Performed very well, but he's prone to a nice crash, similarly to Logan Sargent. What can Jack Doohan expect? What can Franco Colapinto expect? What can we expect from Alpine? Do we see Jack Doohan leaving after half a season? Just break the news. Please say no, because
Yes, I do. I absolutely
oh
do.
dear, oh dear. Okay.
I think this news about Franco Colapinto and his emergence really has come a couple of months too late for Alpine, because if you think about it, I said this on the last episode. Franco Colapinto signed a 5-year contract with Alpine. You don't do that unless you've got some assurances that you're going to be racing and that you'll be getting that seat that sooner rather than later. So you've also got Alpine coming out and saying that the pressure's on Doohan and they're not ruling out the possibility of a mid-season driver swap. The guy's had one race in Formula One. This is how they're talking about his seat already. So you do feel bad for him that he's being treated in this manner. But Formula One is ruthless sport. And when you've got a driver like Franco Colapinto, who's, proved towards the end of last season that he has got a lot of potential, they want him in that seat. They want him in his seat as soon as possible. Pierre Gasly's not going anywhere. So I think, unfortunately for Jack Doohan, he was in the right place at the right time to get that seat. However, it might be a case now that he's actually, with Frank Colapinto coming in on such a long contract, that it's almost the story's already written, and I think it is. I think the first hint that he's not performing to the level that they expect, he will be put under a lot of pressure. And I think he'll be replaced next season, to be honest. As sad as it is to say.
Oh dear. All right, well, that's all my reaction. That's all I can say about Jack Doohan, really, because he's been waiting for an opportunity in Formula One for so long. And obviously his father Mick Doohan, a former title winner in the motorbikes in his own right, and obviously he's wanting to see his son in the spotlight in Formula One, but it could be just that one season, and it could be all curtailed because of the emergence of Franco Colapinto in Formula One. But the Formula One merry-go-round continues, and our good old friends at Aston Martin have promoted Andy Cowell to become the new CEO and team principal at Aston Martin, and Mike Crack moves to chief trackside officer. Um, for the two of us, there's obviously the names obviously with team principals don't ring a lot of alarm bells because when as Formula One fans we really are excited by the kind of the drivers and the racing in front of us, but when it comes to obviously the more behind the scenes, you hear the names Toto Wolff, Fred Vasseur, Christian Horner, even you talk about Andrea Stella as well. But especially with the teams that are less that have lesser names, Ayumu Komatsu could be seen as kind of a big name as well, especially with his promotions at Haas. But when it comes to team principals, Ethan, what do you think when these changes kind of happen in teams, and what do you make of Andy Cowell? Does Andy Cowell ring a bell to you? Does Andy Cowell bring you any bright spark? Does Andy Cowell give you any excitement for Aston Martin ahead? What do you see, and what do you think as a Formula One fan when you see a team principal being changed and that merry-go-round happen in a team?
Honestly, not a lot. As far as I'm aware, it's just a change in role for Mike Crack, and I think it's swapping between the two. Maybe they think he's more suited to the team principal role. Maybe, they want to keep Mike Crack on board, but he's not the man to take them forward as team principal because it is a big role. There's a lot of pressure on it. There's a lot of it can shape the team. You look at Andrea Stella when he came in at McLaren, where McLaren were at that point in time. They ripped it all up, had the confidence. I think he was brought in a few years before as an engineer. He got promoted to team principal. He kind of ripped up the floor plan that had happened, went in a different direction, and look where they are now. They're the world constructors champion. So there is a. I'm not saying this is going to happen with Aston Martin. I'm not saying this is going to happen with Haas with A. Komatsu, but there it's about how the direction of the team moving forwards, and I think that will be a big thing. Because if you get it right, the upshot is there's a big upshot. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out. But like I said, I don't know anything about this guy. I imagine he's been working in Aston Martin for a while now. He's impressed the executives, and they want to promote him from internally. So that's all I can think.
Like you mentioned there, you mentioned Ayumu Komatsu right there. And we'll move on to Haas now because it's happened. We've got our first ever female race engineer on board. And it's happened at Haas. So Laura Muller becomes Esteban Ocon's race engineer for 2025. And it's another pathway for women in Formula One. We've obviously seen a few a few female figures in Formula One in the seasons gone by. Obviously, you want to say the real stone and the real rock of Formula One when it comes to women. You could arguably say Angela Cullen, Lewis Hamilton's physiotherapist. We'll obviously talk about her a little bit later on. But in terms of becoming a race engineer and becoming and having more roles for women, surely this is another milestone for Formula One and for women wanting to work in motorsport. But we've seen our first ever race engineer, our first ever female race engineer, and it's happened in the year 2025, and it's something that's positive, and it's another positive movement for women in motorsport.
Absolutely, yeah. It's good to see. Good to see that it's happened. I think it was only a matter of time. You look at sort of there's a growing number of women in the sport, and rightfully so, because for me it doesn't matter who they are, what gender they are, what race they are, what religion they are. They're good enough, then they deserve the opportunity. And I don't think many people would disagree with that. And the people that would disagree with that, I hope they don't listen to this podcast, to be honest, because I really wouldn't want them to. So that's how I feel about it. I'm sure that's how a lot of people feel about it. It's good to see the opportunity given, and hopefully there's a place for more women to get into motorsport, because obviously there's been a big initiative about it over the last few years to increase the sort of the women in motorsport, and looks like it's working from as far as I can tell. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but you've also got the F1 Academy. You got things like Drive to Survive, putting F1 in the shop window, and hopefully that encourages more women to take up fields in motorsport in Formula One.
On to our second to last topic before we talk about a certain somebody's first day at Maranello. You know who it is. Everybody knows who it is. We know who it is, but we'll talk about him last. Let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix being extended. So the Belgian Grand Prix has been extended to 2031, but we will see it being rotated in 2028 and 2030, with it not being on the calendar for those 2 years. I think we are heading into a new era of Formula One where some of the iconic races will be rotated. Namely, the first one being the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps in 2028 and 2030. What will step into its uh, in its place, we don't know yet, because we are talking 3 and 5 years respectively down the line. Um, but it's a little bit of a sad one, because Spa has hosted so many iconic races, and for it to be missing 2 years worth of running can be seen as a little bit sad, because because of how iconic that race has been in the years prior. Ethan, what have you made of the news? It's obviously good that the Belgian Grand Prix has been extended. Everybody's obviously happy that we get to see racing at Spa-Francorchamps for 6 years, for another few years, shall we say? Um, but to see it being missed off the calendar for 28 and 30, it's a little bittersweet moment in a sense.
Yeah, it is a shame to see. First of all, the good news is that it's remaining on the grid, because I think there was a real fear at one point that it might be off the sport altogether, which would be such a shame. I'm not against the idea of rotating races between years. I'm not against that idea. My issue is it's the races that are being rotated, because Spa is one of those circuits that is a classic, is a staple of Formula One, and it should remain on the grid. You look at some of the races, like you got Vegas, you got Miami, you've got Qatar, not Bahrain because that's been a good circuit, but Saudi Arabia. I think these are circuits that can rotate on a every other year basis. So maybe have Miami one year, Vegas the other. But unfortunately, that's not the way we're going. Cash is king, as the famous quote says, and these circuits offer a lot of money, and it's only a matter of time until other circuits like Monaco are taken off the grid, because they're the ones that don't pay as much to Formula One to be on the calendar. And I do fear the path we're going down in terms of Formula One and the FIA, with some of the decisions being taken and some of the what's being proposed. But what can we do about it? There's nothing that we as individuals can do about it, but it is a shame to see. But I think, like I said, I'm not against the idea of a rotating races. It's just about picking the right races to rotate, because we still haven't got a Grand Prix in Germany. You got two fantastic racetracks in the Nürburgring and Hockenheim that aren't on the calendar, which is an absolute travesty.
Let's move on to the main event, and the main event is Lewis Hamilton. He's had his first day at Ferrari. looking like the Godfather himself, looking dapper. And we all know the picture that I'm going to reference. It's him in front of Enzo Ferrari's house. And the picture that I'm going to reference is him standing in front of it, of course, with the seven windows and one door. Seven windows could be looking at the seven world championships that Lewis Hamilton has won already for one door, being the eighth world title that Lewis Hamilton can get. Those are just the connotations. Those are just some things that some fans are likely to dig from that image from that image exactly. And I think even yourself, Ethan, is that what you're sort of digging at? Is that what you're kind of hoping will happen? Because it's pointing in the right directions, surely, with that image kind of being the first staple image that Lewis Hamilton has posted about Ferrari and his time at Maranello.
Absolutely. The seven windows represented the seven championship that Lewis Hamilton has won, and the door to the eighth at Ferrari. I think Ferrari's marketing since this is over the last couple of months, since this has been playing on and people are talking about it, has been absolutely phenomenal. From the posting everything at 1644 to there's countless things that have been done over the last few weeks, and I think it's just genius. They're building up the hype. They're keeping people waiting, and then they deliver this. You've got Hamilton stood in front of the Enzo Ferrari's house. Then you've got him in the race suit, him with the helmet, the yellow helmet as well. Both a nod to Ferrari and to obviously him having a yellow helmet for much of his career. It's just genius. And like I said in the last episode, I am firmly on board the hype train, and I cannot wait to see how this plays out.
One good thing for Lewis Hamilton, surely, Angela Cullen. She's back with him alongside Lewis Hamilton for the first time since first race of 23, I believe. Since after she departed Mercedes, I think that's what I read up on anyway. But she's back alongside Lewis Hamilton for the 2025 season and maybe onwards. But how crucial is it for Angela Cullen to be back alongside Lewis Hamilton ahead of what seems to be such a crucial season for Lewis Hamilton?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And going into a new team where you don't know anybody, it's always going to be helpful to have a friendly face in there, and you've got somebody that you know and you can trust and that you've worked with before. So that can be a benefit. Yeah. So I think that's only going to help Hamilton. Obviously they've worked together for many, many years. She was there when he was winning world championships. So it's very odd timing, the fact that she left last in 2023. I think it might have been a little bit later. It was after like sort of 4 or 5 races, as far as I'm aware, but I could be wrong with that. And now he's left Mercedes 18 months later. It's weird that timing, whether it's correlated, I don't know. But they obviously get along very well. They've got a good partnership, and hopefully it helps them in some way.
Finally, your closing thoughts, Ethan. Are we firmly on board the Hamilton Ferrari hype train? As obviously a Charles Leclerc fan, we're both going to be hopefully experiencing a lot of highs and not so many lows in 2025. But what do you make of obviously Lewis Hamilton's first day, and what do you expect Lewis Hamilton can deliver in 2025?
Well, I think the title is a bit of a stretch, to be honest. It will be lovely for me to sit here and say, do you know what, he's going to go and win the eighth. But it will take some time to adjust to that team. It's only natural, because he's not raced there before. He's not familiar with some of the intricacies of the car and how the feeling of it. So I would expect, I'm not expecting him to be towards the back or anything like that, but I think he might just be a couple of attempts behind Charles for the opening few races. And then it's something that will build up and build up. So a competitive season in 2025, and then go for the title in 2026.
There you have it from a Lewis Hamilton fan himself. That kind of rounds off our episode of F1 News, episode 4 of season 5 of OnTheGrid Podcast. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me. We'll be back very, very soon once again once we find another decent topic to talk about. But in the meantime, keep listening, keep streaming, keep engaging, all that good stuff. Like I said, we'll be back very, very soon, hopefully with a few decent episode ideas so we can give you a lot of entertainment ahead of a very action-packed season in 2025. We'll be back very, very soon. Like I said, enjoy everything that we've delivered so far for you. Goodbye.